There are 298 prisoners on death row in the state of Florida. This is part 17 of the series. Kenneth Hartley, 56 years old, 30 years on death row. A witness stated that on 22nd of April 1991, the victim, Gino Mayhew, was selling crack cocaine outside of the victim's Chevrolet Blazer when Kenneth Hartley and two co-defendants, Ronnie Farrell and Sylvester Johnson, approached him. The witness saw Hartley pull Mayhew into the driver's seat while holding a gun to his head. Farrell slid into the front passenger seat and Hartley took the seat in the rear behind Mayhew. Johnson followed the Blazer out of the parking lot in a pickup. Police discovered Mayhew slumped in the driver's seat on April 23, 1991, suffering from 5 gunshot wounds, 1 to the forehead, 3 to the back of his head, and 1 to the shoulder. For the first-degree murder, robbery, and kidnapping of 17-year-old Gino Mayhew, Hartley and the two co-defendants, Farrell and Johnson, were each charged and tried separately. Farrell and Hartley were found guilty and given the death penalty. Johnson was also found guilty, but he was given a life term. Thomas Moore, 50 years old, 30 years on death row. Moore was found guilty of robbing, killing, and setting Johnny Parrish's home on fire. Parrish lived in the same area as Moore, and the two were close friends. On January 31, 1993, at 3 p.m., Moore and Parrish were drinking outside Parrish's home. Moore said in a statement that Clemens and Gaines, two local kids, approached the house. Earlier that day, he had observed the same two young people having a rifle. At the trial, Clemens refuted these incidents. Gaines and Clemens both attested to speaking with Moore about robbing Parrish. It was decided during this talk that Clemens would enter the house with Moore and Gaines would act as a lookout. Gaines said that he did not see Moore or Clemens enter the home, but that he heard 2 gunshots, saw Clemens leave the building, then come back in through the rear door. Gaines turned to leave the house, but Clemens followed him and informed him that Moore had shot Parrish. In his testimony, Clemens claimed that after entering the home with Moore pulled a revolver on Parrish. He shot Parrish because he refused to tell him where he hid his money when he asked him. When 2 neighbors observed flames pouring from Parrish's home, they rushed inside to save him. He, however, had passed away by this point. The fire inspector claims that there were 2 different purposeful fires started. Shorter, a witness, claimed that Moore instructed him to burn a bag of garments that he had brought him. He also claimed that Moore added that he had shot Parrish and set fire to his home. Moore made it clear that after shooting Parrish twice, Clemens fled the house and Moore used the lawnmower top that he had found to set fire to it in order to burn off any remaining fingerprints. Shorter dialed his mother's phone, who then made a police call. According to testimony from a prisoner, Moore claimed that he didn't intend to kill Parrish, but that he had no choice because he knew who he was. Another neighbor said that Moore had asked him to rob Parrish as well. Jack Slimy, 51 years old, 29 years on death row. Slimy was found guilty of murdering George Bloomberg, the owner of a pawn business, and he was given the death penalty. Marilyn Bloomberg found her husband George Bloomberg dead behind the counter of the pawn store they co-owned and operated on June 18, 1992. He had suffered traumatic head injuries, possibly from being struck by a camera. He had also been stabbed 3 times in the neck with a pair of scissors and repeatedly struck in the skull with a hammer. Police only discovered 1 pertinent fingerprint, and it belonged to Keith Whiteman, whom Slimy had mentioned in his evidence. Kenneth Dobbins, a witness, claimed to have seen 2 young males enter the shop and have a conversation with Bloomberg regarding a piece of jewelry. From Dobbins' description, composite drawings were created. Thomas Capels, his stepdaughter's boyfriend, was shown the sketch by an officer because he shared the same age range as the suspects and would know them. Capels couldn't place either person. However, he later got in touch with the officer because Jack Slimy, the club's manager, had offered to sell Capels a gun, and Slimy resembled one of the persons depicted in the composite sketches. After Capels' information, a controlled weapons purchase was organized. The gun that was purchased from Slimy had a serial number that matched the list of guns at Bloomberg's pawn. Another well-planned gun purchase was made, and the weapons in question likewise matched the pawnshop registration. Shortly after the second gun sale, Slimy was taken into custody. In a recorded oral statement and a written statement, Slimy admitted to killing Bloomberg. He informed the police that he and Whiteman entered the shop and had a disagreement with Bloomberg on the cost of a necklace. He claimed that Whiteman ordered him to strike Bloomberg before telling him that Bloomberg would have to be killed since the victim knew who they were. Bloomberg was stabbed with scissors, slammed in the head with a camera, and lastly struck with a hammer, according to Slimy. Contrary to what he initially told the police, Slimy testified during the trial that Whiteman killed Bloomberg. Keith Whiteman was convicted and sentenced to life for first-degree murder during the commission of a felony. He also was sentenced to 10 years for robbery with a deadly weapon. Ken Lott, 70 years old, 28 years on death row. On June 23, 1995, Ken Eldon Lott was found guilty of first-degree murder and given the death penalty. On the morning of March 28, 1994, Rose Connors' body was discovered in her estate's master bedroom, both naked and murdered. In addition to being severely beaten, Connors also sustained major injuries like a knife wound to the back, a cracked larynx, and a sliced throat. Medical examiners determined that Connors' neck injury, which severed the jugular vein, was the true cause of death. Other than a few bruises on Connors' thigh that might have been caused by her legs being pulled apart, there was no real physical proof of SA. Lott worked on Connors' lawn at her house before the murder. Lott and Raymond Fuller planned to rob Connors on the day of the murder, when they ran out of money and were unable to buy drugs. They came up with a scheme to rob Connors in which Lott would act as the designated driver and Fuller would be the designated robber. They both were high on cocaine and crystal meth when they committed the heist. Because Connors got away from Fuller and ran out of her home, the heist did not go as planned. Lott, who was hidden in some bushes outside her house, immediately caught her and dragged her back inside. Lott claimed he beat Connors because she was retaliating like a maniac and that he had to kill her because she would have known his identity and would have resulted in him being imprisoned. Lott and Fuller stole a diamond tennis bracelet from her home after killing Connors. Lott went back to tidy up the crime scene later that evening. A few months after the incident, Lott was identified when his acquaintance Robert Whitman got in touch with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Whitman claims that Lott approached him after the event and made an offer to sell him a gold ring and a tennis bracelet set with diamonds. Lott acknowledged killing Connors with Fuller's help during the meeting. When Whitman and the Sheriff's Department came up with a plan for Whitman and Lott to meet to discuss the stolen jewels, Lott was apprehended in May 1994. Before the case went to trial, Lott testified that Whitman had made up the murder of Connors. Whitman had previously encountered legal issues thanks to Lott, Lott said. Therefore, Whitman was setting him up and seeking retribution. Even though Lott acknowledged using Connors' ATM card and PIN, Lott insisted that Whitman had provided it to him and that he was unaware that it had been stolen, particularly from Connors. Employees of Lott's wife have testified that she was observed wearing a diamond tennis bracelet at work one day after Connors passed away. Presley Alston, 52 years old, 27 years on death row. James Lee Kuhn was robbed, kidnapped, and then killed by Alston, who was found guilty and given the death penalty. Kuhn was last seen leaving a hospital in Jacksonville on January 22, 1995, and his red Honda Civic was later discovered abandoned behind a convenience store the following day. Alston was living with Gwenita Faye McIntyre at the time, and on January 23, 1995, Gwenita fled from Jacksonville owing to an argument with Alston. McIntyre saw Alston and his half-brother, DeLeangen Ellison, arrive in a red Honda Civic from behind as she parked her gray Monte Carlo in the lot of a convenience shop. McIntyre couldn't leave because Alston and Ellison had parked parallel to her. The McIntyre's Monte Carlo was then occupied by Alston and Ellison, and they all departed together. When Alston informed McIntyre that the Civic had been stolen, McIntyre realized Alston was in possession of a pistol she kept at home. After learning of Kuhn's disappearance and realizing that Kuhn was driving a red Honda Civic on the night of January 22, 1995, McIntyre developed a suspicion about Alston. Alston questioned McIntyre about how long it would take for fingerprints to wear off a bullet and the body to decompose. That's when she started to suspect Alston was involved in the crime. On May 25, 1995, McIntyre told her minister what was going on before getting in touch with the sheriff's office. Later that day, authorities detained Alston and Ellison based on the facts McIntyre provided deputies and the pistol they discovered in her residence. Alston confessed in writing that he and Ellison intended to rob Kuhn. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.